One of the most unique buildings on campus is the beautiful John Taylor Building, which houses religion, humanities, and philosophy classes. The building was designed to stand out, constructed intentionally to resemble a temple. With its white interior and the front of the building pointing up to heaven, it stands as a reminder for students, employees, and visitors of BYU-Idaho's mission to develop lifelong disciples of Jesus Christ. A mission the university hopes students will remember and continue seeking even long after they graduate. John Taylor himself was always known as a very religious man. Many people, maybe even yourself, may already know that he was the third prophet of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. He was one of the three men who were with the prophet Joseph Smith when he was martyred in Carthage jail. He also helped lead the saints in the exodus from Nauvoo, Illinois to Utah. But there's so much more we can learn from John Taylor's life and example. So today, we're going to focus on some stories that may not be quite as well known. Welcome to the BYU-Idaho Roots of the Mighty Oaks podcast. I'm your host, Eden Rowe, and here we talk about the history of BYU-Idaho and how it applies to us today. The stories shared during this podcast are true, and they can help us understand and appreciate how BYU-Idaho became our beloved institution. John Taylor loved religion and God from a very young age. He grew up trying to understand various religions and teachings in order to know God better. He joined the Methodist Church when he was 16 years old and became a minister. His family traveled from England to the United States and Canada quite a few times for their church, which resulted in many wonderful experiences and miracles. One particularly important experience was John meeting his beloved wife, Leonora Cannon. Leonora was also a member of the Methodist Church, where John was a preacher who taught a Bible class she was in. John fell in love with Leonora before she did with him. Part of the reason for Leonora's hesitance was because she was 12 years older than him. In fact, she was so much against marrying such a young man that the first time John proposed, she said no. But later, Leonora had a dream where she saw herself with him, and that helped her to agree the second time he proposed. Throughout their study of the scriptures together, they both began feeling like something was missing from the Methodist doctrine. During this time, they met Parley P. Pratt, who was serving as a missionary for the newly restored Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and rented a room in their home. The couple was very wary at first, but as they studied, prayed, and discovered for themselves, they both had the desire to be baptized. After his conversion, John had many powerful experiences that led to his friends and fellow saints giving him different titles that reflected the love he had for the gospel. One of the experiences and titles involved the missionary who introduced his family to the gospel, Brother Parley P. Pratt. During his first year of being baptized, John witnessed the church undergo heavy persecution. With much of that criticism targeting Joseph Smith, many members of the church began doubting that Joseph was a prophet of God, including Parley P. Pratt. When Brother Pratt shared with John some of his doubts and concerns about Joseph, John stood up to the missionary that introduced him to the gospel. His response to Parley was very powerful. He said,
"I am surprised to hear you speak so, Brother Parley. Before you left Canada, you bore a strong testimony to Joseph Smith being a prophet of God. Now, Brother Parley, it is not man that I am following, but the Lord. The principles you taught me led me to him, and I now have the same testimony that you then rejoiced in. If the work was true 6 months ago, it is true today. If Joseph Smith was then a prophet, he is now a prophet."
Shortly after this experience, Parley P. Pratt repented. This experience, among many others, earned John titles that were well known by many of the early saints, such as the Defender of Truth and the Defender of the Faith. Another remarkable experience came when John was visiting Columbus, Ohio, to speak at a church gathering. Before the gathering, members of the congregation warned him that many people in the town were planning to tar and feather John, and that for his safety, he shouldn't preach. Though we can imagine he was grateful for the warning, John was determined to preach as originally planned. At the start of the meeting, John made it known to everyone there that he knew of the plot to tar and feather him, and that if anyone was planning to go through with it, they could do it now. He then removed his vest. No one came forward, and after a brief pause, John went on to teach the crowd for 3 hours. Though John Taylor might come across in these stories as a little bit intense, he was also known as a kind man. He was an excellent father to his children, and like anyone, he had his own passions and hobbies. He was an eloquent speaker and had a gift for expressing himself, verbally as well as on paper. John loved to write poems and songs, and because of his gift with words, he oversaw a lot of the church's printing press, working with early newspapers like the Nauvoo Neighbor and Times and Seasons. The Nauvoo Neighbor acted as a weekly community newspaper. It contained local information like upcoming events and activities, as well as sermons that Joseph Smith and others conducted. Times and Seasons was a newspaper that was published once or twice per month. It focused on new truths being revealed, as well as uplifting, gospel-related topics. You can compare this to the Liahona magazine that we have today. These newspapers helped give hope to many during trying times, like the death of Joseph and Hiram Smith. Shortly after this tragic event, John Taylor took to the press and wrote the announcement of their deaths. Eulogies were written and published as well. John Taylor and Willard Richards, the two men who witnessed Joseph Smith and Hiram Smith's martyrdom, printed their testimonies of the prophet and the gospel of Jesus Christ. Different parts of their writing became parts of Doctrine and Covenants, section 135. John Taylor wrote the following, now recorded in Doctrine and Covenants 135, verse 3.
Joseph Smith, the prophet and seer of the Lord, has done more, save Jesus only, for the salvation of men in this world than any other man that ever lived in it. He lived great, and he died great in the eyes of God and his people, and like most of the Lord's anointed in ancient times, has sealed his mission and his works with his own blood. And so has his brother Hiram. In life they were not divided, and in death they were not separated.
These powerful words brought comfort and solidified testimonies in the darkest times of confusion and persecution of the church. John Taylor helped saints turn to the heavens instead of running away in defeat. He defended his faith throughout his life. John Taylor developed new skills to help his community and continued to learn from those around him. When Brigham Young succeeded Joseph as the next prophet of the church, he initiated many plans to increase the education of the saints. He and Dr. Carl G. Mazer started creating small private schools to give saints the chance to have an education without being involved and influenced by other Christian denominations and outside sources. Enemies of the church wanted everyone to go to public school so they could steer members of the church away from the leaders of their faith. However, these enemies were clearly disappointed when these new private schools became a huge success. Two notable examples being Brigham Young Academy would eventually become Brigham Young University, and the Bannock State Academy, which would become Brigham Young University, Idaho. After Brigham's death, John Taylor followed in his footsteps by supporting these private schools and continuing to advocate for higher education. When John became the prophet, one of the things he focused on within the education system was hiring good teachers. He spoke to the parents about their children and the importance of giving them good teachers.
Whatever you do, be choice in your selection of teachers. We do not want infidels to mold the minds of our children. They are a precious charge bestowed upon us by the Lord, and we cannot be too careful in rearing and training them.
As John guided and recruited teachers, he also encouraged teaching spiritual matters in classes of all subjects. Towards the end of his life, John started laying down groundwork for a church-sponsored education system that is still in use today. It seems very fitting that BYU-Idaho's religious education building is named after such a faithful and strong example of discipleship. Much can be said about this man, but for me personally, I feel like the most valuable lesson to be learned from John's life is that of defending and truly living what he believed in. Nicknames have a power, and John Taylor's titles showcase that he would defend the gospel at all cost. No one then or today could look at his life and doubt where the defender of truth's loyalties lie. It makes you ask the question, what would I be willing to defend? Brigham Young, University-Idaho, has a powerful mission to develop disciples of Jesus Christ who are leaders in their homes, the church, and their communities. The school's goal for students who graduate is to internalize this mission statement and make it a part of who they are. There might be times in the future when you'll have to defend your own faith and beliefs. It's nice to know that we aren't alone and that people of the past did the same. Thank you for listening to the Roots of the Mighty Oaks podcast. This episode has been produced and read by BYU-Idaho communications student Eden Rowe.